Hello again. My name is Laura Erickson. I am Head of Innovation and Sustainability at Swissnex San Francisco. Some of you who have not joined us before at Swissnex San Francisco, we are basically a platform for open innovation, connecting stakeholders in Switzerland, working across education, research, and innovation to opportunities and insights here in Silicon Valley. In my role, I'm working mostly with corporates and helping them with their innovation projects, whether those are internal or external. And I've been doing sort of like a series of workshops with some of the people that I work with and know here in Silicon Valley to help you all as you are going through this time and figuring out what innovation and transformation means for you and thinking about the futures that you can create. I think this kind of thinking is very important right now. We've all been, in a strange place for the last few months as the pandemic has continued. And more recently, as police violence has become more and more obvious, we realize that, there are many changes that we need to make. What we're going to present to you today are some tools for how you can think about the possible futures and how your actions and your beliefs and your behaviors today can influence those futures. I want to let you know that tomorrow we'll be having another event. It's about diversity and inclusion, and it's beyond Silicon Valley and how diversity and inclusion can be a part of our post-pandemic world. I'd like to invite all of you to join us for that event tomorrow. You can find the information on our website. And I think that will be a great follow-up for today. So I know I'll be thinking about how diversity and inclusion can become one of these future worlds that we're going to talk about today. And with that, I will bring my little intro to a wrap and let me introduce you to my co-host today. That's Diana Joseph here from the Corporate Accelerator Forum. The Corporate Accelerator Forum is a membership-based organization that helps corporates that are working with startups to be able to do that open innovation game better. And Diana and I met, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, and we've been talking about doing some things together, and we're quite aligned when it comes to various topics, including this one today. As we were kind of reaching out to each other and, saying what's going on, in this pandemic world, we realized that with the innovators that we work with, it'd be quite useful to think about foresight and different ways that you can build scenarios. So we thought it would be really cool to get together with the Institute for the Future, and given that we both know Sean Ness, we got together and made this happen today. So let me turn it over now to Diana. She's going to go over how this event is going to run today, and then she'll introduce you to Sean. Diana, floor is yours.
Thank you. I really appreciate it, Laura. I want to say that I've been feeling really hopeful today, and that is because police brutality and structural racism have always been with us. And I have a new feeling about one thing, which is the enthusiasm for learning that I'm feeling in myself and that I'm seeing, and the openness to trying things and making mistakes. In the spirit of learning and learning connected with the future, I wanted to share a couple of organizations that I've been learning about recently. One is called the Black Futures Lab, and the other is called Black to the Future. And I encourage you to go learn about them as well. So as Laura said, Sean is the first person both of us independently thought of when we were looking for someone to bring us a toolkit for ourselves and for our members and for our friends and family and really anybody. Because learning about the future feels so important right now. It feels really more important every day. So thank you for being here to do that with us, Sean. Here's how it's going to work. The first half of the conversation, Sean is going to be presenting, and there will be some questions for the rest of us as we go. The Q&A function is open, so if you have questions for Sean along the way, feel free to ask them, and we'll manage them as best we can, planting them where we think they can land best. And the second half of the conversation will be interactive, and we'll tell you exactly how that's going to work when we get there. if we have a few minutes at the very end, we'll open up the conversation for just general discussion. So thanks for being here. And Sean, Sean is with the Institute for the Future is a think tank that really focuses on the future. Couldn't be a better resource for us. Sean's been there for 16 years, and we're delighted to have him lead us today. Thank you, Sean.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, Laura. Thanks, Diana. I'm really happy to be here this morning. One quick note, this panel is being recorded and it'll be shared on social media later. So if you have colleagues or friends or family that want to check this out, they'll be able to do it not too long after this ends. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen. This PowerPoint will also be shared. One of the things I like to do when I give a presentation is note other research that we've done during the presentation and make sure that that research is available. So to Laura and team, I'll be sending out an email that's this long right now. It might get longer depending on topics that are introduced or asked about during the presentation. So without further ado, here we go. IFTF has been looking at post-COVID futures for about 3 months now. We started looking at the end of February, early March into what life will be like after the future of COVID. And so we're early in that work. We're probably going to wrap it up by October or so. The flow of the project is initially focused on California, then the US, then globally. So those are some of the geographies that we're looking at. So you may see some US, California focus initially in our research when you dive deep into it, but know that when it's all played out, it'll be more global in nature. And the purpose of this presentation is to, at a high level, talk about what foresight is, how foresight can be used right now in the current state of life that we're living in, and then showcase some of those early scenarios that we've come out with our post-COVID scenarios. And then we'll move to the exercise that Diana is gonna facilitate later on. So, oops, I'm sharing, open it up big. And IFTF, my employer, we've been around for over 52 years. Usually the first question that's asked of us is, how accurate are your predictions? That's probably on the tip of many people's tongues right now. We do not believe that anyone can predict the future. It's just not possible to do that. But it is possible to forecast plausible, internally consistent forecasts or scenarios. And so that's where we spend the bulk of our time. And the purpose of that is to help people and organizations systematically think about long-term futures so that they can make tactical day-to-day decisions and also strategic decisions for their long-term benefit. We like to help people identify a desired or preferred future and build a capacity and techniques to achieve that long-term future. Our domain areas span across society, from technology, health, food, learning, work, etc. What's going on right now? The reality today requires us to look at both the long term and the short term. And a big part of that is we need to act in the present. And if we're going to act in the present, it should be at the benefit of our long-term futures. Sometimes when we act in the short term, bad things happen. Here's an image of Chernobyl. Some bad things happened. And this is a reminder, some of our decisions in the short term can have lasting implications on society. We want to be very, very careful that the choices we make benefit as many people as possible and don't do the damage that what happened in Chernobyl. One thing to note is people and organizations just aren't really good at long-term thinking. It's not something that we're born with. It's something that we have to learn. And a lot of that has to do with the fact of how the brain works. So I'm going to jump into an MRI image really quick and just show you a little insight. When you put a person into an MRI and you ask them to think about the past, certain parts of their brain fire up. And when you ask them to also think about the future, almost to a T, the same spots open up. And that's because the brain is just a big store of memories. And so to recall the past, you go to memories. To recall the future, you also have to go to memories. So this is going to sound counterintuitive, but in order to imagine the future, you have to look at your memories. So good foresight professionals spend a lot of time talking about the future, living in the future, asking questions of the future, so that they're making memories of the future. And as the future starts to unfold, you start to see these memories being recalled. So they're not as much of a surprise. So to understand this, once you understand this, you realize you really have to not just read about the future. You have to talk about the future so that you start making these imprintable memories in your mind. Now there's another twist to this, which is this psychological look, is that the present often overwhelms the conversations about the future, holds a really tight grip on us. And some of the things we have to be aware of is, yes, we're living in a pandemic. Yes, we're living in a world of civil strife and protests, but there's also these other things that are really challenging for us: the automation of jobs, climate change, asset inequality. These things are not going to go away. So we have to be mindful of all these other big long-term challenges as we move forward as well. So one way to deal with this reality is just to ignore it and let the fires go on around us. And that's one technique. And another way to deal with this is to be overwhelmed by it. Retreat, go to your home, your nest, because you feel disempowered. But we want to be authors of this future. We want to have agency. That's something critical to understand. And right now it's really hard to imagine positive futures, but we have to be able to do that in order to act on the future. We're going to take a little break right now and go to a poll question. So that should be popping up on the screens.
Yes. We're going to give you about 20 seconds to answer the question. So where are you spending most of your thinking lately? I know where I'm spending mine.
And I believe there's 2 poll questions. So we'll do.
Okay.
I think that's right. There's a question, we'll see the answer. Then there'll be a second question and we'll see the answer.
All right. So we are done. Let's see the answer and then we'll bring up the second question.
Oh, wow. There's a lot of foresightful people here. Good to see the past, because the past is pretty important. And yeah, it's not surprising that we see people focus on the present, but there's a mix there.
That's where I was. All right, next question. Do you think the pandemic will fundamentally reorder business and society? We'll give you another few seconds for this one.
I personally am hoping that it will.
What do you think?
Yeah.
I mentioned I'm hopeful today. Yep. All right, we'll give you another couple of seconds and then we'll close the poll. All right, let's see what we said. Oh, wow. That's so exciting.
Mm-hmm. There's a phrase at our office of long-term optimists, short-term pessimists, where we see things are pretty sad in the current situation, but long-term we're optimistic that we'll gather together one another. We'll work our way through this, get to a better place.
So moving into the actual content.
And we have somebody that just came on. Could you mute?
Sure.
Everyone who's coming on should be muted. Yeah, thank you. I'm going to jump on to the rest of the presentation. So, or keep the presentation going. So, one of the ways, Alvin Toffler, a pretty noted futurist who wrote Future Shock, thought that the future is happening so fast we feel like an alien in a new world. And I have to say these last 2.5, 3 months are very strange, very different, but also very similar. We see a continuation of a lot of things are like the repetitive, like Groundhog's Day. So it just definitely feels alien to us. So how do we work through this? What are some ways to deal with this future shock? So one of the ways is to look at the evidence, talk to people, get some kind of situational awareness of what's going on. This requires you to kind of get out of your social, your current social system and get out there. One of the things I use is Lunch Club. I think it's www.lunchclub.ai. It's a way to meet one or two new people a week over over a Zoom meeting or a Google Hangout and have a coffee or have, oftentimes we're eating because it's around lunchtime, but it's a way to see what's going on outside of your social sphere. Another way to look, to mitigate this is to look back, to look forward. How have we dealt with big issues in the past? How have we resolved them? How have we moved forward? It's a good indicator of how we'll deal with things today. So a lot of things that happened during the 1918 pandemic around the anti-mask league, tensions around wearing masks. We're starting to see that again. We haven't got word yet about school reopenings across society yet in the fall. Some have indicated where they're going, but for the most part, we're still not sure where we're going. And one thing we learned back from 1918 was about 20% of parents did not send their children back to school, regardless of what the professionals and experts were saying. I wouldn't be surprised if you see parents having hesitation, even if schools want to reopen. Signals. This is something that everyone should be adding to their practice if they're a foresight professional. This is the tried and true method. You wanna, if you have a forecast or a scenario about the future, you have to see some kind of a signal or a signpost in today's world that suggests we're moving in the direction of that scenario or that forecast. And these are about what's emerging. What are some new practices, new technologies, new social movement changes, new laws, new business model changes. What's early that's happening that has a potential of growing and moving into other areas. And if you can make it a practice, you can start to see past, present, and early views of the future as we move forward. We're going to talk more about signals later on in this presentation. Another thing is to look at some big archetypes. What are some examples of what we're looking at? And we have some alternative scenarios in this presentation that we're going to check out some early sketches of that. What are your values for the future? It's not just about what technologies are going to exist that are going to save us in the future. That's not our viewpoint at all. Technology is a tool that humans use. So one of the things you can bring into these conversations are values, emotions that you want to see. What do you value? Is it security and safety? Is it freedom? Is it societal well-being? Try to remember to bring these values into the conversations. And finally, keep assessing the situation. See what's changing, see what's not changing, and try to continue to review. Once you have a kind of a framework about the future, you can continually add signals to reassess where you're going. Is one scenario headed more strongly than another? Is the initial desired or preferred scenario that you decided upon shifting a bit because of new information or new changes in society? Where we are today is influenced by where we have been in the past, and where we are today is going to be greatly changed by the decisions we make in the here and now. So there are lots of different possibilities in the future. If we leave our homes or where we are right now and go left as we exit the door, that's one future. If we go to the right, that's a different future. So this is sort of like the butterfly effect. Things that happen can have big changes across society. And so we want to make sure that the choices and events, that things that happen today remind us that this sets the stage for what's happening next. So there's not one future, there's many possibilities. And because of that, when we look at the future, we like to look at multiple futures just to kind of stretch the thinking of the mind. We did this 11 years ago in a project called Superstruct inside of IFTF. So it's 2009. The forecast was that in 2019, society, think of like a UN body, is going to turn on the Global Extinction Awareness System, which is a supercomputer connected to AI, connected to all the world's data, that has one purpose. When will humans cease to exist because of what we're doing in society? And quickly, GAS finds that society will cease to exist in the year 2047. So we have 28 years before society goes away. And it's not because of one thing, it's actually 5 different things. So in 2009, we forecasted these 5 things would lead to a breakdown in all of society. A global quarantine because of a respiratory disease outbreak that doesn't have a vaccine, which is one, we called it REDS. A second one was a breakdown in the food supply. We call that scenario ravenous. A third was a breakdown in the energy system. That was the power struggle scenario. A fourth was a breakdown in the political environment, spearheaded by some fraudulent election happenings that we call the outlaw planet. And so it has a lot to do with corruption and crime. And the last is around a global diaspora of people, mostly due to climate change. So imagine if sea levels rise, the Bangladeshi people are underwater, millions upon tens of millions of people have to go somewhere. So can they go through the desert? I'm sorry, through the jungle? Probably not. Can they go over the Himalayas? Probably not. Would they go through India? Yeah, that's the flattest, easiest route. In this scenario, you have India closing down its border. We call that scenario Generation Exile. This was meant as an exercise to make people aware of things, and people who went through this exercise started to think about how they would live in a society that had disease outbreak, food shortages, energy challenges, corruption and crime rising, and challenges to a diaspora of people. They imprinted in their minds memories of the future so that as the future unfolded, they could be prepared for it. So that's the kind of exercise we're trying to get to here, is preparing you for a future. And why do we do it? Is we want to be surprised by simulation. We don't want to be blindsided by reality. If you can anticipate something happening via simulation, you can be prepared for it, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So don't be blindsided by reality. So let's not be blindsided by COVID. Let's walk through some simulations of the future. And in this project, we looked back about 140 years ago, I'd say. The purpose of that look was to look at other depressions, recessions, wars, terrorist attacks, et cetera, and looked at what did society do. And we found that traditionally they go through a three-step process. They respond, they reset, and they reinvent themselves. So the response actually doesn't take a week or two. It actually is years, a year and a half to 2.5 years of response. That's the typical time frame for a response. And then we get to a reset. And oftentimes that reset's not a desirable reset. It's just the situation of today's reality got us to this point. We've kind of got to a status quo, and we're not happy with it. And so we want to, we're humans, we have agency. Let's change our future a bit. And that's what you see people do. We reinvent. So each of these scenario sketches has 3 of these curves of response, reset, reinvention. And we're also starting to see one thing that pops out is what's being revealed in this new reality. So some of the things that are being revealed is our healthcare system is broken. It's efficient, it's not resilient. We don't have things like the little sticks with the plastic swabs at the end to stick up our noses and our mouth to do the tests. We don't have those. And because we don't have those, we can't do tests. That's an example. Complementary to that is you see some economic implications on the healthcare system. There's a lot of people that have healthcare and they're doing okay in this situation. And there are people that don't have access to healthcare and they're not doing okay. We're seeing racial injustice. We're seeing political divisions. We're seeing supply chain brittleness. We're seeing a continued breakdown in the fabric of a society. It's very fragile. And so upon these revelations, that's kind of like this backdrop or a filter of looking at these scenarios. These revelations of healthcare system, injustice around racial lines, political divisions, et cetera, they're not going away. So we have to deal with them. We have to consider them at some point. So let's dive into some of these scenarios. I'll start with the scenario around growth. This is a scenario that somehow manages through massive debt accumulation to drive a low slung economic recovery in which capitalists could continue to aggregate wealth. So we call this saving capitalists. This is, again, it's growth. And if you'd start to see some things like TSA style gate fever checks. So as businesses start to reopen, there's going to be temperature checks. You're going to have something pointed at your forehead or touch your forehead. It senses your temperature. And if your temperature's in the right parameters or below 100.4 Fahrenheit, sorry for the rest of the world who lives in the non-imperial system and can function appropriately there. You're going to see a lot of temperature checks to be able to do things. The goal at the end of the day for a lot of this is to get to these immunity cards that you see down at the bottom. If you have that immunity card, if we can get to a world where there is immunity and you can prove you have an immunity, that card will open doors for you to jobs, to travel, even into restaurants and museums and zoos. If you don't have that card, you're going to be boxed in like the person in the lower right. You're going to be marginalized because you're going to be continually quarantined. You're going to see a lot of rise and growth in the biotech world, the technology world, a lot of tracing and tracking, a lot of data, a lot of biological workers in this scenario. And at the end of the day, you're going to see some kind of a monopoly around the health vigilance state, a big growth area for the public-private surveillance infrastructure. So government and industry comes together to kind of help us move forward and get back to where we were, low unemployment, profits, low unemployment rate are the drivers for this scenario. The next scenario is the constraint scenario, and this is where social solidarity emerges across society, and it forms an acceptance of this social solidarity accepts limits to growth and embraces a new deal grounded in mutualism and new forms of collective ownership. So basically, this is society coming together to help one another. It's the society, or the focus is on societal well-being. So mutual aid, people coming together. You see Spain doing this with universal basic income. They've already indicated they want to continue on with that. A rise in a hero class of people. These are the frontline people that are helping battle things. And this front line of healthcare workers, of distribution, of warehouse workers, of the meat cutters, they're the ones that are actually getting COVID. And should we continue on providing them hero benefits if they're going to be on the front lines for us? And if we're gonna deal with the pandemic, let's get two birds with one stone and also use this as an opportunity to deal with climate change. Because if we're gonna have to focus on human wellness in a pandemic change world, let's focus on human wellness in a balanced climate world as well. So this is where you're gonna see society provide internet access to food, access to education, access to health is going to be provided for everybody. We're all in this together. And what comes out of it is a contract around collective ownership. Not a redistribution of existing assets, but what new asset classes will be created that can be shared across society. We have a side project called, or a manifesto on universal basic assets that I'll share with you in that follow-up email. Transformation. This is a scenario really pulled from what's worked in Asia, Southeast Asia, and Australia and New Zealand. It's a scenario in which contact tracing technology restructures society into germ pods that crosses today's social and racial boundaries, but creates new red line communities based on health. So an example of this is, say, you already see a germ pod being created between Australia and New Zealand. They kind of nip this in the bud. They don't see more people. I think New Zealand has one person left that has it. They're under quarantine. And if Australia and New Zealand have conquered this, then they can work together to rebuild their economy, travel, tourism. So they're sending people back and forth now, and expect them to invite other states and nations in who have likewise dealt with this pandemic in a good way. So Hong Kong, Singapore, Vietnam, South Korea, Taiwan, expect to see them being pulled into this germ pod. You also see this with Hollywood. Hollywood wants to reinvent itself, or not reinvent itself. Hollywood wants to produce movies again. So how do you do that? The people that put a movie together, the actors, the crew, and the catering, the support staff, they're all going to be quarantined for 2 weeks in kind of a hotel complex. Once it's proven that they don't have it, then they'll go film. They'll quickly film it, film the movie or the TV show, and then they'll go back to their lives and send the content on to the distributed network of editors and producers. So that'll be a music producing germ pod. And you also see the NBA wanting to do this. Initially, Las Vegas said, hey, we have a lot of hotels. So if the families of the NBA, the film crews, and the people to support all these people want to come to Vegas, we have a lot of space and we have arenas where they can play basketball games. And it looks like Orlando's going to win out. Disneyland has a lot of hotels as well. Disney owns ESPN. So it looks like this is going to end up in Disney. So don't be surprised to see like a 22 teams head off to Orlando for a few weeks to play basketball, so that we can see this germ pod structure exist. The last scenario is around is driven by politics, where we have a collapse in a political system where both sides are pointing to each other saying, you're at fault, you're at fault, you're at fault. And we're seeing that. We're seeing that now. Really, really a lot. Initially starts with some masks being put out there, and there's vigilanteism around the mask, like you should wear the mask, I don't want to wear the mask. So you have tension around that. It leads to more border controls and issues around immigration policies. And lately, it's been like Canada shutting down the border with us and others shutting down the border with us here in America. It's not just America shutting down the border. It's a two-way street. And you see some tensions around supply chain and food chains, where we have to have meat, so you have to cut the meat so people have steak and pork. There's a political focus on that. And we thought it would take a while in this scenario, but we're already seeing the reset happening, where you're seeing the creation of local militias that are coming out and protecting the targets of the world. State National Guards are being employed or suggested to be employed. Federal military is being guided to intervene, and the governors are being asked to motive or put people out there to prevent the protests and looting from happening. So where this goes towards is a new constitutional convention, where you start to see some states leave the union. So much like Brexit, California leaves the union. So that's the long-term scenario. Know that because this scenario seems to be the one winning out from our perspective, we're really going to kind of pivot in our scenario effort and do a much deeper dive in this scenario. We're going to call it Beyond Collapse, Pathways to Transformation. So we want to be cautious when we move forward with our research. We don't want to be too focused on this. Just in the last day, we've seen some of the protest, not the protests, but the looting kind of going down a little bit. The protests are still occurring, but the looting and the violence is starting to go down. So those are high level views of these scenarios. There's more context in the PowerPoint. So when you get this at home and you want to dive a little deeper into this, you'll see that. And expect every 3 to 4 weeks, we're going to dive deeper into these scenarios and provide more content. From here, we're going to dive into a couple more questions.
Sean, I also wanted to invite people to put the questions into the Q&A function. This might be a good time for some of those. Perfect. So I'm displaying. I can't. I'd have to get out of this presentation to see that. No problem. We will bring them to your attention as they arrive. And yeah, let's go ahead and put up the poll question as well. Which of the 4 scenarios presented seems most likely to you? Growth, transformation, constraints, or collapse? Give you another few seconds on that.
And I understood that in the future we have to rename the collapse scenario. What was that? Beyond collapse? Did you say?
Oh, right now, from our perspective, because collapse seems like the obvious one that's about to happen, at least here in America. I want to be sensitive to the global audience. Other nations definitely have this under control, like New Zealand, Vietnam, etc. So they can move back to constrained transformation and growth a little easier. So that's just a reminder. When you look at these scenarios, geography often comes into play. So these scenarios play out in different geographies. And I think when we see the poll answers, it'll probably be reflected of that. Yeah, transformation, germ pods. That one doesn't surprise me so much, because probably a number of people see that as a clear path forward, leveraging technology and AI to move us forward in a structured way. And thank you. Collapse is the least likely. That's hopeful, very hopeful. Perfect. I think there's a second poll question that we're going to ask here, or a fourth one.
Yeah, let's see. And this is a multiple choice option. You can check more than one box if that's how you're feeling it today.
I can kind of see what's happening in the background here, and I think we don't have so many fearful people actually on this call. I was thinking we've probably got a self-selected bunch here a little bit. It would be interesting to do these poll questions, you know, throughout the United States, throughout other countries, and see what people think. We've probably got, you know, the people that are focused a little bit on innovation and transformation on this call.
And see how we change, and see how they change over time as well. See how the answers change from day to day and over an arc. All right, so let's see what the data looks like from that question.
The one I wanted to realize.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that makes sense in this optimistic crowd, as Laura was saying.
Yeah, when we ran that Superstruct project back in 2009, we wanted to engage people, and what we called the people were SEHIs, super empowered, hopeful individuals. So to me, it sounds like we have a bunch of SEHIs on this presentation as well, super empowered, hopeful individuals. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to go forward with the presentation, and just we're going to dive into some little thoughts about thinking about how to, we're going to move into some signals. So we shared the forecast. So let's see some signals that are suggesting we're moving in this direction. So I'm just going to touch lightly on these. Oh, I'm sorry, Diana, you have a question? You're on mute.
Sorry to interrupt you. There are a couple of questions from the Q&A, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Before we get into the signals, which I'm very interested in.
Sure.
Laura Buffard asks, how do you model the influence between different scenarios being played out in different geographies, and how this modifies the trajectory of the future in any one place?
So these scenarios are meant to be starting point scenarios. We use them for fodder to inform a group of expert panels. We use a group of people on an expert panel. The people on that panel were also made privy to interviews with frontline people pulled from ethnographic research. So as we dive deeper, we're going to focus on different geographies. We've already had some folks in like Thailand, for example, offering to assist and help with the Asia perspective. Similarly in New Zealand, another group in New Zealand has suggested to do that. So the key thing is you need to speak to people in the know in those locations. So you provoke them with these scenarios. That's the foresight. And you want to use the experts to generate insight. What does it mean for me, my team, my department, my region? I'm sorry, what does it mean for me, my team, my department, my industry, my company, my region? What does it mean for me personally, my neighbors, my neighborhood, my country? So using this provocation, you can convene a group of people around a topic, around a question, around an industry, around a geography, and dive deeper. So some people might want to know, what is the impact on the food industry? What is the impact on Campbell's soup? What is the impact on Tasmania? So each of those three is a very specific question, a deeper dive, and you could use all the same provocation with an informed group of experts to really get to the nuances of the geography.
Yuka Nagashima asked a question that's right on point with that, and maybe you've answered it. I want to see if you have anything to add. She asks, when forecasting scenarios, how much focus do you give to a specific industry, your main industry versus others?
Yeah, so the bulk of this work is focused on societal implications. So it's on food, governance, data, politics, the economy. It doesn't go into things like CPG, advertising, the transportation industry, technology industry, for example. So this public project has societal domains of focus, but it could be definitely taken into very specific industry domains if we wanted to. We're going to do that in our ongoing internal research, and you'll start to see some signals because I pull some signals for the impact on work, health, and I think education that we're about to see.
Great. Thank you. Lisa Mendoza asks, in the global society we live in, is it possible and even likely that one dominant scenario in one location will ultimately dominate globally? If so, which one do you predict will dominate?
We don't predict, so it's the P word. It's our 4-letter word. So we never predict. Think of the scenarios as very extreme versions of each of those domains: growth, collapse, transformation, and you're probably going to see something positive in each of them, something desirable. So when you craft together a preferred or desired future, it's going to be a agglomeration of pulled from. That's not the right word. We're going to pull from all the scenarios, and we live in such a global society. It would be virtually impossible for one scenario to play itself out completely. So if I was to make a prediction, it would be that we're not going to have one future. We're going to have multiple futures around the world. Again, just look at New Zealand in contrast to here in America. The same thing's not going to play out in these two nations.
Thank you. There's one more question in the queue. We'll hold that for later. Let's move on to the signals conversation.
Okay, perfect. So I'm going to share a bunch of these signals. Signals, again, these are signposts of tomorrow. So these are things that could expand. So when you see a signal, for me, since I've been at this for 16 years, when I see a signal, I know it's a signal. Just in my mind, I go through this exercise of how could this expand? How could this impact a different industry? And if it's combined with something else, how could that really blow up and be transformative? So some work signals that we're starting to see, for example, would be around air travel. So I think air travel went down to 10% of capacity right after it hit, and now it's back to like 15% of capacity, and some forecasts that even in the next year or two, it's only going to be back to 60% capacity. So what's the business model of airlines? The business model is the profits come from business travelers, people who probably aren't paying for the flight. It's their corporation that's paying for the flight. So if you see corporations and who are financially challenged and are seeing success with virtual meetings and gatherings, one of the obvious things is they're going to pull back on travel and conferences and get-togethers. And instead of flying people around on business class, they're going to put them in Zoom and Google Hangouts, right? And so if airlines aren't enjoying that cash flow of business travelers, they're going to be themselves cash strapped. So biz travel has a huge impact on the airline industry. So it's going to take probably a long time for biz travel to bounce back. And we're already seeing airlines going out of business. Colombia's Avianca, I believe, has already gone bankrupt, and a number of others are trying to go bankrupt, but their assets are 20, 25-year-old airplanes that nobody wants. And if air society crunches down, all those old planes are just going to be pushed to that Tucson graveyard that you see in some movies. Facebook is indicating that it's going to permanently shift tens of thousands of jobs to remote work. So if you're a knowledge worker and you can do everything on a laptop and a mobile phone and a headpiece, then you can work anywhere, right? This has huge implications for a lot of things, and it's not just Facebook that's suggesting this. Many organizations are suggesting this. We'll dive deeper into this signal in a little bit. New Zealand a president has suggested, let's move to a 4-day work week. Let's move more towards work-life balance. So if we have to teach our kids at home, we have to have some kind of a balanced home, right? If we're going to work and teach or kind of proctor our children, let's try to help our economy bounce back. Let's get comfortable doing travel again. So thinking of a 4-day work week is a way to boost productivity and happiness is something they're thinking. So don't be surprised if other smaller places, not smaller places, but smaller nations like Israel, Switzerland, Norway, Sweden, Finland, it's Denmark, opt into some similar ideas around work-life balance. Some health signals that we're seeing. We're seeing a huge push in AI, not just investments into pharmaceuticals and genetics, but the AI around all around this industry looks to go up, increase into the billions and billions of dollars. Blue Dot is a Toronto-based company. They saw an outbreak of pneumonia in Wuhan, I believe on New Year's Eve. And it took WHO about 9 days to announce, hey, there's an outbreak of pneumonia. It's probably tied to some new disease outbreak. So AI has really good potential to be there in the front lines to see future outbreaks, but also just be there for every step of the way. What's the best time to go for a doctor appointment? When do you transition from a Zoom to a video to face-to-face for a visit? A lot of these questions can be answered through AI, machine learning. So expect healthcare to be really reinvented through AI investments. Australia put out a tracing app that was adopted by 1 million people in only five hours. So if you have trust in your government, these kind of technologies and tracing apps can be readily adopted. If you don't have trust in your government, there's a solution. That's the private business who will get into this business. So PwC has a product called Check-In, which does the same as this Australian technology. It's just there's more trust in corporates and less trust in federal governments and some other places. So this allows PwC an inroad into tracing. So tracing is going to be needed, whether it's provided by the government or by the industry. That'll be a lot determined by the trust that you see in government. And while I'm on that topic, trust, when we convened that expert panel a few weeks ago, that was the key thing that was that the experts saw holding society back from recovering. Do you trust your neighbors? Do you trust your colleagues? Are they adhering to protocols around wearing masks and safe distancing, et cetera? Or are they being loose with those rules? When they're going to protests, are they shouting out and spreading the vapors? Or are they keeping masks and staying a couple meters away from one another? So how do you trust people? You really need to trust people before you move back. So for any organization, government, foundation, academic, corporate, that's the key thing about reopening. You have to show that you have policies in place. You have to show that you're following them. And if people don't follow them, you're dealing with that as well. You're not being flippant with the rules. Some education signals we're seeing here in California. The CSU and UC systems, which control something like 700,000 students. These are the Berkeleys, the UC Davis, the Fresno States of the world. All of them will be online in the fall. So this isn't true for every university system around the world. This is just true in America. Other places are already opening up their education system, but here in California, they're being very cautious. And that's just California. What if other states intend to do this? Huge implications on these, on the town and gown of a university, the catering system. Just think of all the catering people that have to serve these students. If the students go back, what do these catering people do? And the janitors and the lawn care people, what do we do with all these extra buildings that we're no longer using? That's a sign of concern. If this expands to high school and elementary school education, they're all online. What are the parents going to do? How do you have a work-life balance if a bulk of your staff are also dealing with childcare during the workday? So these are huge challenges that we need to have conversations around. We're really doing well around shifting to online, and this might also remind us of how to deal with climate change. So if the temperatures are 40, 45, 48 Celsius, and you can't go out because it's not safe to go out, stay at home. This will probably be really good practice for us around how to deal with climate change, and not just in the schools, but also in the workplace. And finally, we tend to be very concerned about very specific things. Like if we're going online, how do we know that kids aren't cheating? How do we know that they're not looking at some kind of an online If they're taking a test, how do we know they're not looking at their phone, for example? So there's a lot of focus on preventing cheating and not focus on providing good quality education. So you see this surveillance state come in. I know it exists on Zoom too. You can track your employees. Are they on the Zoom? Are their eyes focused on the camera or the display, or are they actually watching or looking at something else? Are they looking at sports scores or buying something on Amazon? So the paranoia around what people are doing at home, and this is also his lack of trust. Trust plays its hand again. This pops up. So when we look at all these signals and consider them, let's do another dive into some skills that we can kind of expand upon. I like this image because it's about an insect that has developed gears, or it's evolved gears to snap its legs or move its legs, and it's preparing for the future through evolution. And so it's sort of like a biological transformation. So let's use this bio and telepathic kind of thinking to think about how we'll change our own practices and how we'll evolve our own skills. So one thing that we need to do as humans is be better at lie detection. This has something to do with a topic we call cognitive immunity. There's a lot of mis and disinformation out there. It really behooves you to know what is and what is not true. Don't just post something because it mirrors your worldview. Go dive deep into it and seek out the background of where that data came from. If it's not, if you quickly can't see that it's not from a non-biased source, just really track it. It behooves you to not spread mis and disinformation. Another one is emotional check-ins. We do this a lot in calls where we have an icebreaker, or we check in on somebody, or you do this chit chat for about 5 or 10 minutes in the beginning of a meeting, because we don't have water coolers anymore. We don't have the trains or public transportation that are bringing us in to and from work, where we can have these idle conversations with people to check in. We have to make time for check-ins, especially for those people who are alone and don't have the social safety net. So make sure you're asking about how people are feeling, because so many people are just dealing with a lot of weight of anxiety right now. We have to design places and spaces where we can actually connect with one another. Right now, I'm in a spare bedroom. I know Diana's in, I think, her dining room. Laura may be in her living room or dining room. We're all at different angles. We have different lighting. In a room where we're all face to face, we can look at each other and learn from one another's body language. We're all dealing with the same situation in that regard. You would know if I have a sleeping child here that I'm being mindful of, right? That could be true. So we have to really think about people's mental ecologies and how we're designing to be in the same kind of mental space. If you look at how society combines different ways of people together, there's a group of people called fixers, and there's a group of people called healers. The fixers are the people that want to create solutions. And then there's other people, the healers, that want to guide us through this recovery. It could be also seen like surgeons and doctors. I expect as we move forward, we're going to see people also bouncing back between these two. You might be a fixer in one situation and a healer in another. But no, be cognitive, be aware of the situation. Are we fixing it, or are we healing it? Are we creating solutions, or are we guiding right now? Also, based on situations, we're going to go home to our caves and be separated from society, and sometimes we're going to venture off and be migratory. So initially, that migratory was about getting food, getting supplies, maybe going to the doctor's office, and slowly we're opening up. But if there's a spike, we're going to go back to our caves, and so we're going to learn how to move back and forth through this nomadic lifestyle, and really think, what does it mean to be mobile, and how do we coexist with these two kind of examples? We also are going to see the evolution and expansion of storytellers and people focused on logistics. The storytellers are the focus that can tell us a story to pull us to the future. This is the people that talk about what motivates us, what excites us, what Give us a myth, give us a story, something that we can wrap our arms around, something that we can be focused on. This is where we want to be. This is how we're going to get there. Let's do it. But then you need the logistics people that actually take this is how we're going to get there and put it into motion. So there can be that provocateur that talks about a desired future, and then there has to be the practical person, the logistics person that really gets us there. Simulation literacy. We spoke about this a little bit earlier. You have to be literate in these simulations. These aren't predictions, they're forecasts. They're provocations, and they're meant to elicit insights for teams of people about where we could be, how we could get there, etc. So being really good about simulating society direction and be literate in that world is critical. And this is kind of self-fulfilling, but having the capacity to think long-term and act upon those long-term futures is going to be very, very useful. That's the end of this presentation. Now the time, I think, is going to be spent to answering as many questions as Diana suggests that we answer, and then we're going to pivot into a workshop kind of situation where I'll provide a little context for like 5 minutes, and then we'll do some workshopping.
Perfect. Perfect. I thank you for that last slide. That feels like a blueprint to me to help us understand what we need to learn about, what we need to help others learn about. I'm going to go ahead and transition into our platform for the interactive section, and I'll leave it to Laura to bring the questions forward.
Thank you. So I'll man the Q&A. So please, everybody, if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and put them in there. I think that was a lot of great information. It was definitely a lot of dense information if this is new to you. So let me go to the questions. We had one kind of from earlier on that was just speaking to aspects of mental health. You know, we started kind of like looking at, you know, are you spending most of your time in the past, present, or future? And we learned, you know, some things about people with depression. Just any general thoughts about that, Sean? This is a question coming from Mikkel, if I'm saying your name right, Mangold.
Yeah. We all deal with, we're all dealing with this in a different way, in different environment. And it really behooves us to consider the mental aspects of a lot of these things. So when you're having conversations, for example, about opening up your office again, you really have to have these conversations about people's mental well-being, about their feeling for safety and security. And it goes beyond that. Knowing do they have elderly loved ones in their network that they're caring for that are at risk. Like I have high blood pressure and asthma, and I'm 49 years old. I don't want to be out and about unless I actually have to be, because I'm technically at risk. I'm 5 weeks away from being 50, so I'm in that pool. Do they have children at home? Are they balancing this work-life balance? So please don't just think of what are the technologies we need to reopen our office. Please go beyond that. Think of people's mental health, mental well-being when you're going through these considerations about opening up and moving forward.
Thanks for that. I think that's super important. So another question from Yuka Nagashima. And this is going back to the signals part, and I think it's an important one. You know, what are some factors that make something more likely to be a signal versus noise? How can we help people think about what the difference between those are? Right.
So a lone signal by itself isn't all that useful because it's just one data point. So you want to see a number of signals popping up. So you have the UC system and the Cal State University system announcing online. If you start to see a number of other educational systems doing likewise, it's no longer just a signal. It's a gathering of signals that's moving us forward. And again, back to the definition of a signal. It's got to be a new technology, a new business model, a new law, a new regulation, a new change in social sentiment. So that alone makes it noteworthy. If it can be combined, and through that combination, it's more powerful, that's an awareness that it's really a signal. So just being aware of the combinatorial effect of signals, as well as the number of signals, that'll help you change away from the noise. But you definitely want more than one signal that suggests you're moving in the direction of a forecast.
Okay, thank you. So we'll do, I think, one more question before we move then to the interactive exercise that's going to be about some consequences from those signals. So this one is coming from Kensuke Nagai, if I'm saying that right. Yeah, based on what you've seen, do you have any ideas for a new way of networking, you know, for connecting with people in a way that feels somehow natural? I know we haven't solved it quite at Swissnex.
Yeah, I have a friend, Jonathan, who has a podcast called Talking Tech, Drinking Wine, or Drinking Wine, Talking Tech. And it's two guys based out of Palo Alto. Jonathan used to be the CIO for the city of Palo Alto, and the other fellow's a serial entrepreneur. And they were making comments about just like Silicon Valley. Like, why do you live in Silicon Valley? For the networking effect, right? You want to meet people serendipitously. And if you're not meeting people serendipitously, why are you living in Silicon Valley as an entrepreneur? You're wasting a lot of money on high rents and mortgages. So how do you connect with new people in serendipitous ways? And so they were going, talking about some new things for like Zoom and other online platforms where you press a button and the group of people are automatically put into small little rooms of like 4 or 5 people, and they may be new people. So now you're kind of forced to meet them, right? So that's one thing I've seen, a technology solution. Another would be that Lunch Club one that I brought up earlier. Lunch Club was originally a platform that connected people who wanted to actually have lunch and meet face to face. And they quickly pivoted in the first quarter from face to face to virtual. So look for other signals of platforms of conferencing systems that allow for this novel networking. What was one of the first examples of that? Chat roulette, where you pressed a button and you just magically connected to some random person out there on the internet. I saw people with masks, saw people that were playing poker, tic-tac-toe, and some really naughty stuff. But expect usually it's the artists out there who are creating some of these early signals. So I wouldn't be surprised if look at the artistic community and how they're trying to tackle this world of networking, because they'll probably come up with the more desirable paths forward.
Very, very good advice. Diana, I think you are ready for us with the background for our exercise. Is that right?
I am indeed. I just wanted to say one thing. On the note of networking, I'm hosting a happy hour every other Thursday. The next one is next Thursday. If you're interested, just send me an email and we'll get you an invitation. Okay, that's an online happy hour. Should I go ahead and share, Sean, or do you have something else that you want to show first?
You go.
Great. All right. So Sean is going to guide us through this exercise, and I will be capturing the visuals of that here. You, as participants, can type into the chat, which is now available to you. So when Sean asks a question or suggests something, your answers go into the chat, and he'll guide us through how that moves into this space.
Perfect. So can I steal back the screen real quick?
Yes.
Okay, so here's this exercise. It's called drawing out consequences. So you saw the game board that we're gonna use in a minute. So the way this, I'll use a story, sort of like a parable, and then we'll get into the kind of the workshop component of it. So here's the story. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of a shoe, the horse was lost. For want of a horse, the rider was lost. For want of a rider, the message was lost. For want of a message, the battle was lost. For want of a battle, the kingdom was lost. All for the want of a horseshoe nail. And what this tells us is one little thing can have huge influence. You have this cascading effect. So this ends up becoming one of our key techniques in the world of foresight. When you're provoked with some kind of a provocation, we want to think of the initial consequence and the consequence of that consequence and the consequence of that consequence and so forth. And when you do that, you start to get these like chains of really interesting events that can really lead you into some really detailed scenarios or forecasts. So if you're using provocation and you want to know, how do I create a scenario out of this forecast, this is one of those things that you can use fodder to create a scenario. The U.S. Forest Service has a foresight division, and they use this consequences process, and they call it a futures wheel, to do similar kind of efforts. So one of the scenarios, or one of the provocations, and they wanted to see the implications of this, the consequences of this, is central hardwood forests lack age class diversity and will uniformly grow old. And what they mean by this is, in the forestry world, you tend to clear cut, take all the wood, you leave a couple, 3 trees per acre, per hectare, for whatever reason, and then you plant new, and you start to have all the trees grow up at the same level. And what are the consequences of this? A perception in society that all forests should look like this. All forests should look like a farmed environment. You'll see a decrease in early successional forest. You'll see an increase in late successional forest. You'll see decrease in resilience around extreme weather change and climate change. If all the trees are really tall and a windstorm knocks them all down, you're starting from scratch again. You don't have any of the little trees that didn't get blown down, for example. You'll see a decrease in carbon sequestration rates. So they used this process to go second, third, etc. And one of the scenarios that they came up with, which was a really interesting provocation, was this. A decrease in resilience, starting off with the hardwood story, one consequence is a decreased resilience to many types of future forest disturbances. Then they see more uncertainty for the industry around timber supply. So the forest industry is in decline. This really reminds me of home. And then you see a declining, from there they see a declining quality of local school districts where mills are located because of reduced tax revenues. So actually there's probably something missing there between number 2 and number 3, which is if there's more uncertainty, mills may have to lay off, furlough, or close down. And then you get to the third area of declining quality. So, but who would have thought that this initial scenario would mean decreased tax revenue and impact the local school district? So that's what we mean by you can get to really interesting nuances when you dive deep into this topic. And so this is what our view of the wheel looks like. You use that initial prompt in the middle, that provocation, and the provocation we're using, and Diana was kind enough to give it a little more clarification. So organizations shift most jobs to remote work. This is the prompt, and we're going to walk through this, thinking through first, second, third order consequences, and we're going to use the I can't remember if you said Q&A or the chat to really pull this through. So people will suggest
the chat. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, people will suggest in the chat a consequence of this. If organizations are permanently shifting thousands of jobs to remote work, what does that mean? So just take some time, think through what are some consequences of the shift of jobs to remote, put them in the chat, and then Diana will start to populate and share. And what we're going to see is some of you may see some similar ideas popping up, and others you may not have even thought of, which is awesome. This is the purpose of this exercise, is to see some shared views, but also see some differing views. Oh, these are great.
You want to say some out loud as we go?
Yeah, offices. Oh, I gotta
So
move the chat.
So everybody can put your consequences in the chat window. If you have that open now, Sean, there's stuff starting to come in.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh, they're coming fast now.
Oh, yeah. Perfect. You guys are awesome. Offices will get smaller. We don't need as much office space. So especially if we're starting to move back into the offices, you're saying half of the office come in on these days, half comes in any other day. You can do a lot of shared desks. You don't need as many resources. That's great. Moving to cheaper locations to live. You saw Facebook come back really fast around this, because I've personally seen a lot of friends go up to their Tahoe houses or just rent places for a long period of time. And Facebook has already said, hey, this has implications for taxation. and benefits. If you're saying you're living in one place and we're paying taxes for you in one place, but you're living in another, that's a challenge. So we're gonna look at your VPN. We're gonna look at your location every once in a while when you're tapped into the Facebook network to really know where you're located. And if you're not being truthful of where you're living, there'll be some response to that.
Interesting. What, like, how does that influence taxation? I didn't quite understand that.
So if you live someplace for 181 days out of the year, like Nevada, outside of Tahoe, then you're taxed as a Nevada citizen.
Oh, I see.
Or the states are going to want to get your hands on your income, and the employer needs to know where you're living to know which state to pay. If you're only going on vacation for a couple of weeks in Nevada, it doesn't matter. So I think NBA players have to deal with this. Professional athletes have to deal with this because they're playing in all these different places and they make so much money. Every state taxes all the people. You don't want to be a professional athlete and do your own taxes. You definitely have to have a tax professional because you're paying taxes in multiple jurisdictions.
Got it. Speaking of the the kind of real estate aspect in the Bay Area, I don't know if you saw, and I don't know if that would be a signal, but I read yesterday that rents have dropped 10% in San Francisco since a year ago due to the pandemic. I guess we'll see what happens.
Corporate rents or regular rents?
No, like a housing rental. A year ago, the average cost of a 1-bedroom apartment in San Francisco was like $3,600 a month, and so now it's gone down, a little bit.
That's a signal. Yeah, that's.
We've got more. Okay, we've got more coming in there. Are there any of those that you want to call out, Sean, that you think?
Yeah, public transportation will decline because we're not using public transportation. And how is public transportation paid for? It's subsidized, but it's also based on use. So yeah, how will we keep public transportation updated? Do we need public transportation if people aren't moving between suburban and urban anymore? Employers might need to take responsibility for health safety at remote locations. Yeah, my employer has a few employees in Texas. A bunch of people have moved to Austin over time, and one of the understandings is. When you move, you need to take more responsibility for your own situation because you're kind of different. But if everyone's remote and different, maybe the employers have to be a little more focused on that. And I already said, this is perfect. You see the arrows that are creating. Organizations are permanently shifting jobs. We move to cheaper locations to live. A third is real estate market goes down. And can you move the screen?
Oh, sorry.
It's the other one that goes down. Tax rates go down. That's perfect. That's beautiful. Yeah. Now the local economy is seeing less tax revenue. Exactly. So this is that chain that you just created is a wonderful first, second, and third rate. And if tax rates go down, that means an implication for that or consequence would be less revenue for social infrastructure, roads, schools, safety, access to healthcare, et cetera. This is perfect. You folks you're grokking this and getting it right away. Corporate headquarters will disappear. Yeah, I know one of my friends said they work at a food company and they've shut down every single one of their offices. They've gone 100% virtual, and coming out of it, they may realize that was a cost that we no longer need to see as a burden, and we don't need to have offices anymore. So that's a perfect one. Less pollution. We saw that in some places actually, and we saw it not in some other places. We're actually seeing that cars aren't the big creators of pollution. It's actually trucks and shipping. So Los Angeles hasn't seen any noticeable decline in pollution, for example. So that's something that a consequence, it might be challenged and reveal some new things where people might think that cars are the big part of pollution, but cars are pretty efficient and they have catalytic converters and other things that make them not so polluting as other things like shipping, ocean shipping and truck shipping that use more polluting things.
So these pictures that we've seen of a clear, beautiful downtown LA, that's no longer the case, I guess.
It's after a rain. They're cherry picking pictures after a rain, actually. from what I understand. But you go down to Long Beach, you still have tens of thousands of trucks moving in and out of the port of Long Beach, moving goods, and that's the big component of pollution. I would say that's probably an area that needs more investigation. Let's look at more signals in that area around pollution. It's probably been too short of a time to really do a thoughtful pronouncement on that area. But yeah, this is another example of when you're doing this, you don't critique it. You kind of challenge it with other signals, and maybe you flag it as something that needs more investigation. So you workshop this for an hour or two. You assign some responsibilities of diving deep, and then you would follow on this exercise, for example, with what is this? What are all the implications of this for our own organization? What does this mean for our team, our company, our society, our neighbors, our neighborhood, etc.
Coming back from the Q&A, there was one question sort of in that direction that might be interesting here. Do you know of any companies that do that real well, that use scenarios and apply to create their desired outcomes or futures?
Oh, yeah. Some that top of my head that have been doing long-term scenarios in Switzerland would be Swisscom, Nestle. Others would be like P&G, Walmart, Intel, Facebook, WestRock. WestRock's the company that kind of rode the coattails of Amazon and make the cardboard boxes. Who are some others off the top of my head? The U.S. Dairy Association, Dell Technologies, AT&T, Deloitte, Accenture. There's a number of organizations that have foresight capacity and are using scenarios in a productive way. Oh, this is a nice one. We're hiring more people from different states, even some from Europe. In the past, we preferred to hire people from the Bay Area. Yeah, if you don't need to live in the Bay Area and you can live anywhere, conversely, employers can hire from anywhere. And maybe the rationale is if the capacity is being a good online and remote worker, if that's the strong suit, then that might be a new skill set of the future. So I expect in a year from now, I won't be in this office, in this room anymore, conducting work. I need a nice chair. I need an environment. I need cool air. I need better lighting to be an effective remote worker. I can't just continue to sit on a bed or sit on the floor to have these kind of conversations. It's not really good for my personal health. Where's this one? Recruiting talents. She's moving it all over the place. That's great. Recruiting talents finally become global and time differences become the only barrier. Oh my gosh. We had to pivot our face-to-face training workshops to online, and now we have to consider, when do we do them, right? What time do we do them? And we've seen that we can do US really early on the West Coast that helps people on the East Coast and is in the early evening for those in Europe. Folks in Asia are at a disadvantage. So we're seeing that our training, we have to kind of do two trainings, one for the Americas and Europe and another one for Asia. Same as conferences. You can't do 8-hour, 9-hour conferences. You have to split them up. And we're seeing that we're already, keynotes are no longer keynotes. Keynotes are videos. You take a keynote and turn it into video. And then the workshop is the part that's interactive and a talking head. So like a year from now, you wouldn't see me giving that presentation. It would have been a video of me giving that presentation, and then I come on later for the Q&A, or you watch the video on your own time, and then you convene later for the workshop component of it. Salaries go up or down. Yeah, if you're in demand, they go up. If you move away from a high cost area, from Menlo Park to it's Des Moines, Iowa, your salary probably goes down, but your cost of living goes way down. Trust in coworkers may decline. How do you trust people? How do you build trust with online personalities if you've never met them face to face, if you can't see their body language? So trust dynamics are going to transform. Employees feel less connection to each other. So human resources and other groups are going to need to think about the dynamics of connecting people in a more trusting way. You all are really good at this. This is great. Loss of jobs for behind the scene, but valuable workers, security, janitorial, reception. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, some of the jobs that go into supporting those spaces, if the spaces are no longer utilized, kind of go away. What do we do with these spaces? What do we do with these corporate facilities? Do we turn them into housing? Retail is also going away, moving quickly to online. So what do we do with all this retail space? So the corporate real estate is going to need to be very innovative in the coming months and years. And I just got a pop-up. NBA owners to approve plan for 22 team. I didn't see the rest of it, but I have to imagine you're going to see the NBA convening in Orlando. So there's that scenario. I saw an early signal of it. Looks like it's going to play out. So for all you NBA fans who want to see that, I don't really care about the NBA scores. I want to know how the NBA families are going to survive. Are they going to bring their spouses, significant others, and children with them to Orlando? Are they going to be happy living in hotel rooms for extended periods of time? Are they going to put them in suites? What are the people who are going to be catering to all these athletes going to be like? That story is going to be really interesting to me. So how the NBA is able to kind of come back to us with this kind of reinvention of moving everybody to a very centralized germ pod is going to be really, really interesting. Career development. Yeah. Why the movers? Oh, here's one that I saw. Bureaucrats and bureaucracy kind of goes away, because if you're in a distributed online world, bureaucracy is the thing that's holding you back. Like, people aren't going to want to deal with the bureaucrats and the politics. What happens to the politics? Like, you used to be able to cozy up to somebody over a smoke or over breakfast, but if you're distributed, how do the politics of an organization be transformed? Good one.
I'm thinking about what you said about values earlier, Sean, and I think there are some different values that could be implicated, from the shutdown, like we've seen, like what you were saying early on. I sort of realized that, probably extroverts have a much more difficult time, if they're still employed and everything, dealing with, the situation of working from home than introverts do. And I had thought to myself, like, yeah, in that future world, if it stays like this, do we value more the guy in his t-shirt in the basement, eating Cheetos, that sort of thing.
Yeah. Do we all have to dress professionally? I have some coworkers that still wear the button-up shirt, keeps his hair really high and tight, has a very professional background. Meanwhile, you can't tell, I'm in my shorts. I haven't had a haircut in 3 months. I'm in a bedroom, and being okay with these, that's part of that, the environments that we're in, being understanding to the environments that we're in. We're going to see a lot of changes. The environments of, you have to be in the office 9 to 5, like, that just got shuttered right away, right? And we're probably not going to, we're all going to come. When did it happen? During when did we have the earthquake here in the Bay Area during the World Series? 97, 98?
Oh, that was 89.
89. So
Yeah,
that happened.
I remember
We
well.
lost the Bay Bridge for a while, so people couldn't get to work. And it was around the time of the rise of the modem. And so people could dial in and work from home. And that was kind of the rise of the home office, at least here in the Bay Area. But the thing that kind of put that off was this mad disruption from the earthquake that required us to kind of change our work environment. So this is probably more profound because we're doing it for so long period of time. More digital divide. Yeah. People, you already see it in the school districts. People, if you don't have, well, at the workplace, you need, maybe you need multiple displays, right? While I was giving my presentation, I could not see the Q&A because I didn't have a second display. So we're probably going to need to see changes in the environments to allow for multiple views or multiple displays. And who's going to pay for that? Google's already said we'll authorize $1,000 in office equipment expenses per employee. Not everyone can compete with Google from a reimbursement perspective, but you also get into the children. If you have multiple children, each of them needs to do online learning at home. They each need their own display. And what are the bandwidth requirements for 3 teenagers and 2 working parents in a home? So a huge boost to access. And if you live in a community where fiber doesn't exist and you're stuck with low bandwidth, like I am, you're limited to a certain speed. That changes what you're able to do in your home.
Interesting. So we have just a few minutes before we'll bring things to a close. I did want to say, Diana, do we want to share? I mean, great work, everybody. This is an awesome consequence chart. What do we call this again?
Consequences.
Sean? Yeah.
Futures wheel is the lingo.
Future wheel and Diana, wow, you're nimble.
and we've only done this in 20 minutes with a few dozen people. So.
Yeah, this is really cool. I want to make sure that we can share this. Can we do that? Can we kind of like take a screenshot of it or something and share it along with the slides, which we will share as well as a link to the recording?
Yes, absolutely. And we can double check to make sure we caught everything.
Okay.
There's so much good material.
I know. I'm really looking for, because I have to say, like, I don't know how those of you listening were, but I actually couldn't really read all of the chat because you were all very prolific in what you wrote. So I'm looking forward to diving into this. So thank you so much, Sean, for walking us through that foresight process and helping us learn how to write stories of the future. I think that's like really important work to do now. And I just want to highlight that message again, that, you know, the beliefs that we hold about things are important for, you know, for transforming things. And it would be my desire that as we're all sort of shut down, and we are still shut down actually here in California, I think if there are some people on from Switzerland and other places, you might be sort of, you know, kind of back to normal, at least in terms of going to work in an office and things like that. We're not quite here yet. We're taking it slow and being cautious. Hopefully that's all for good. But I think it's really important to realize that your beliefs have an influence on the future, and not only your beliefs, but you got to start there. So
yeah.
Thank you for walking us through that. And then, you know, as you kind of sort your beliefs and what you think is going on and the signals that you see, I just really want to encourage everybody to also think about that desired future that you want, and think about what you can do in your little corner of the world to realize that. I'm going to share something, just bear with me a moment, but there's an article that I read that I liked a lot that talked about the difference between risk and uncertainty. And if you've come to some of these workshops before, you might have heard me say it, but I think it's good, so I'm going to say it again. And you know, risk is something that can be modeled, and, you know, it has probabilities around it, and you can kind of choose, you know, from those kinds of, you know, risk scenarios that you can model. But uncertainty is, you know, you kind of only have one chance, and you have really nothing to compare it against, and you don't know. So I think this pandemic and shutdown is, you know, in that uncertainty category. We have no idea. We have some past stuff that we can look at from 1918, you know, quite a different world that we lived in then. But you know, with uncertainty, if you think of it in terms of game theory, the strategy that you would employ is to think about your it's called mini-max regret strategy. And so you want to minimize your maximal regret. So what would you most regret not trying, not giving it a go for, is what I would say, you know, in terms of that future that you want to see. And that would be my appeal to everybody that joined. And I really want to thank also my co-host, Diana from Corporate Accelerator Forum. And we'll be doing some more of these things. Diana and I have been talking about doing some stuff on circular economy. If any of you out there have an interest in that direction, don't hesitate to reach out to either one of us. Not sure exactly what that will look like yet, but we'll be doing something along those lines. And I want to make another call for that event that Swissnex is doing tomorrow, that's about diversity and inclusion and how we can make that be realized in our post-pandemic world. So you can go on the Swissnex website, swissnexsanfrancisco.org, and sign yourself up for that public event there tomorrow. We'd love to have you back with us. Diana, I don't know if you want to say something as a closeout for some of the things going on with Corporate Accelerator Forum.
Yes, thank you. Please reach out if you'd like to join our biweekly happy hours. We'd love to see you. This I'm so glad that we had this session. I think this is going to become really important to us. At minimum, it will become a key part of a course that we're building for innovators called Welcome to the New World 101. So reach out about that as well, if you're interested. And I wanted also to thank Natalia, who has made everything possible behind the scenes from Swissnex.
Thank you, Natalia. She's hiding behind the Swissnex logo there. She's the one that's been making all of the chat and the Q&A, and we wouldn't have been able to do this without her. Thank you so much for that. Just to bring it to a close, and we're a little bit 1 minute over, but Sean, just for the last word to you, how should people re-engage with these scenarios that you've been working on at IFTF? Like, how should we look for sort of the next step when you're gonna?
Yeah. So once you dive into the scenarios, if you go to the link which we advertise, or you'll see. I'll also share a link to our newsletter, and if you sign up to that newsletter, you'll be updated when these COVID scenarios are updated. So as they are updated, we do our best to make sure it's just not content, but there's also a framework, a process, or a toolkit that's suggested to coincide with the content, so that you can workshop it, you can utilize it within your own organization. So if you sign up for that newsletter, you'll be as content unfolds, you'll see that and be able to utilize it when our full scenario toolkit is announced over the coming months.
Great. So I'm going to send all of you a follow-up email with those materials, and we'll put that link in there. Also put a link to the Corporate Accelerator Forum in there. And so with that, we're done for today. Thank you for your time. And
Thanks so much for being here.
Keep your eye on those signals.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.